And on top of that, they would be willing to give their hand off their to whichever unit the Palestinian National Committee, this technocratic committee comprised of Palestinians that are democratically assigned, right? Eventually, that they would give the to them, as in Palestinians would, of course, still have sovereignty because they would still have a standing military of sorts. Ooh, good news. Interesting news. Breaking news, as a matter of fact. Hamas and Palestinian factions agree to the Gaza ceasefire framework. From our side, yes, a senior Hamas official told Dropsite News. Dropsite News is 100% the most reliable source for Hamas-related matters. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens from the Trump side. We'll see what happens rather from the Israel side. Sorry, not the Trump side. I guess I said the Trump. But so far, so good. If the Nobel Peace Prize is the primary motivator for Donald Trump to actually move on this, then I'll take it. An Israeli official said a Gaza deal could be reached as soon as tonight, local time. So the deal in the initial framework that they designed had a lot of components that Hamas and the Palestinian resistance movement had conceded to, right? There were a lot of things that they had said yes to, right? Technocratic National Committee being in charge of the Gaza Strip and things of that nature, a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Strip, things like that. However, my suspicion is that there were a lot of additional things that Israel had slapped onto it, and the Americans had slapped onto it because Israel had, redesigned the negotiation after Trump had a multilateral coalition of like Arab states and Middle Eastern states that, and even including like the French input alongside Saudi Arabia to put together this Gaza peace plan. But then Israel came in and added additional qualifiers to it. Trump actually also said, like, I'm going to be in charge of it. I don't know why he added his own name onto it somehow. And then they said, Tony Blair is obviously going to be a part of it as well. So there were parts about this deal that not just Hamas, but like no Palestinian resistance member would ever agree to, which is complete disarmament without, complete disarmament in general. So what Hamas said that I thought was really interesting and quite smart was that they would be willing to relinquish authority and dissolve as a political force. And on top of that, they would be willing to give their weapons, hand off their arms to whichever unit the Palestinian National Committee, this technocratic committee comprised of Palestinians that are democratically assigned, right? Eventually, that they would give the weapons to them, as in Palestinians would, of course, still have sovereignty because they would still have arms. They would still have a standing military of sorts, rather than completely disarm, because complete disarmament in the face of a genocide is a laughable position, right? It's utter lunacy. I mean, think about it. Like, complete disarmament in the face of the Russian invasion would also be ridiculous. And this is something that I brought up when Russia was pushing for this maximalist position, right? Russia was like, "Oh, Ukraine has to engage in complete disarmament." That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. So the only reason why I'm not like fully skeptical over this is because I assume that, if I personally am not the first person to trust the United States of America or trust Israel, then I suspect that Hamas also is skeptical as well. So we shall see. It could be because, there is a level of genocide that where they just say enough is enough. Like, we can't take it anymore. We don't want more people to die. And they consider this to be the only way to end it. But as far as the genocide ending, significant assurances that Israel will not immediately start bombing the Strip once again as soon as the prisoners of war have been released. Without significant assurances, this deal is dead in the water. So I don't know. I don't know how this works, but mediators, the source close to the negotiator said, told the Palestinian side President Donald Trump planned to personally announce a permanent ceasefire and had offered assurances that the U.S. would not permit Israel to resume the war after retrieving the Israeli captives. Except those assurances don't really mean much, right? Okay, Matt Iglesias. Wait, what? How am I Matt Iglesias? I'm saying I will believe it when I see it. Okay? I have no confidence that Israel will abide by a commitment to complete cessation of hostilities. I just don't see. I don't trust Israel, and I do not trust the United States of America. We have a great team over there, great negotiations, and there are unfortunately great negotiators on their side also, said Trump Wednesday. But it's something I think will happen. Got a good chance of happening. Our final negotiation is with Hamas, and it seems to be going well. Soon after he made those remarks, Secretary of State Marco Rubio walked up to Trump and handed him a sheet of paper. I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we are very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly, he said. Multiple sources from Hamas and other Palestinian factions have told Dropsite that their central concern in these negotiations was that handing over all Israeli captives would remove nearly all of their leverage if it did not include a complete Israeli withdrawal. Israel has, as a matter of policy, systematically violated its ceasefire agreements with Hamas and also with Lebanon. In entering into those negotiations, Hamas negotiators accepted they were engaging a high-stakes gamble. And yes, the note itself that Marco Rubio handed over to Donald Trump said, "You need to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce a deal first." Our priorities are so cooked, man. Like, this is, if true, this is like world-changing events taking place. And the priorities of this administration are to make sure Trump is first to market with the announcement on his own personal social media platform that he had to create because he got banned off of Twitter after he did a insurrection. This is the country that we live in. I need you all to understand these are the circumstances. This is the country that we live in. So next time you see somebody that comes across as like really stupid, okay, remember that like a ton of people voted for this guy. A ton of people openly say they voted for this. Okay? That's what they say. News Nation claims a deal has been reached and Trump might visit the region. It is remarkable that the break from News Nation, dude. God damn, we are in such profoundly stupid times. Oh, yeah, dude. News Nation. Okay. News Nation correspondent reports Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement on the first phase of Trump's Gaza deal. Okay. I'm glad that News Nation correspondent is reporting that Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement on the first phase of the Trump-Gaza deal, citing a source with direct knowledge of the negotiations. Just in from the White House, on Friday morning, this is CBS News, President Trump will visit the Walter Reed Medical Center for a planned meeting and remarks to the troops. While there, President Trump will stop by for his routine yearly checkup. He will then return to the White House. President Trump is considering going to the Middle East shortly thereafter. Yeah, we already covered the Israeli military escalating his destruction campaign and also utilizing like drones, like or automated armored personnel carriers equipped with bombs, so they can turn around and because they're getting smoked in the APCs so hard that they're using little RC car style APCs. This is a risk, but we trusted President Trump to be the guarantor of commitments made, said Musa Abu Marzouk, a senior Hamas leader, in an interview with Dropside on Monday. Had there been no commitment from the American president, we would never have agreed to take the risk because we do not trust Netanyahu or his extremist right-wing team in the current Israeli government. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure they know. I'm pretty sure they know that America is also untrustworthy. But I guess for them, they just don't really have any other options, you know? I guess America is the top dog in this process, and therefore they have to abide by America's demands. The USA, Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt have provided guarantees that the genocide will end with this agreement as long as the terms are abided by. That means we can expect to see Israel desperately try to convince Trump that Hamas has violated the deal daily. Yeah. They are being smart by inflating Trump's role since they know he wants that peace prize. I mean, I think they're inflating Trump's. They're not even inflating Trump's role necessarily. Trump does have this power. Every American president has had this power. The only difference here is that they're inflating Trump's ego. They're not inflating Trump's role. They're inflating his ego. Because, I mean, they've run out of options, right? They don't have anything else. So if that's what it takes, then great. If that's what it actually takes to get to a permanent cessation of hostilities, to end this genocide, it is what it is. They did it with more comprehensive frameworks. They will do it again. I don't get your optimism. I don't know. I'm not saying that this is I am not saying that this is over. Okay? I'm not saying that this is over at all. As a matter of fact, I'm saying that Israel will most likely violate this agreement. They have never fully signed an agreement similar to this. They've only signed previous, I guess they have. They have signed a previous cessation of hostilities. Israeli officials say the agreement to end the war with Hamas will be signed Thursday, and the first group of hostages will be released on either Saturday or Sunday, according to N12. But it can't just be tied off with it is what it is. No, I know. But at some point, you have to stop the hemorrhaging, right? The problem is, in the first ceasefire that they followed through on, they wouldn't allow the first phase to move on to the second phase. And the second phase was a withdrawal of troops, right? And it does seem to me while everyone is hugging and slapping asses around there, and Hamas has responded to the deal. Yes, Hamas has said that they accept the deal. I am not so certain that this will end, and that I still believe that there will be potentially a violation from Israel. Now we know why they try to kill the negotiators. I mean, I don't know. I want to be hopeful. 5 hours ago from CNN, Israel assesses Hamas may not be able to return all remaining dead hostages, sources say. Maybe they'll use that as a reason. Maybe they'll use that as a reason to be Hamas is violating the deal, I don't know. If they do violate it, they're pushing themselves into a corner of being the ultimate pariah. I mean, have they stopped? Has that stopped them in the past? The only way this stops is if America forces Israel to stop. Ball is in Netanyahu's court, says Trita Parsi from the Quincy Institute. Trump wants a deal. Israel's numbers are plummeting within MAGA. It risks hurting Trump if the U.S. support for it continues endlessly. Yet Netanyahu is very talented at destroying deals and getting the U.S. to blame the Palestinians. Well, he used to be much more talented at blaming the Palestinians. I don't think he's as talented at blaming the Palestinians now. And if this ceasefire deal falls apart once more, I suspect that a lot of people even more people will recognize that it's Israel violating it, no matter how they try to posture as Hamas being the spoiler. I don't think that the United States will ever turn around and say, this is good, we believe Hamas, we trust Hamas, and if Israel violates the deal, they'll say, oh yeah, it was Israel that violated the deal, and we have to we have to stop Israel. That just won't happen. That has never happened historically, despite the fact that Israel has violated numerous deals with Democratic administrations, with Republican administrations. They have always blamed the Palestinians, and America has always also falsely blamed the Palestinians. Okay? That is the case. They always do that. Okay? So we shall see. Negotiators, after consultations with a range of factions, agreed to a deal that will keep Israeli forces in Gaza even after all Israeli captives are handed over to Israel. Throughout the negotiations over the past several months, Hamas has insisted it would not enter into a deal that did not include the complete withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces. This is something they were not able to move, the source said. While the exact lines that Israeli forces will redeploy to as a part of the exchange of captives are still being worked out, Israeli forces will remain entrenched in Gaza. What is this? Hamas is a man of beauty. I have a question. Say Hamas dissolves, releases the left prisoners of war, gives up their arms, all that publicly. Israel won't be able to use them as an excuse to conduct the genocide. No. Like in the case of Ukraine, Ukraine can actually mount a significant defense. In the case of Hamas, it is an effort, but mostly symbolic as Israel is much stronger. No, it doesn't matter. You can't stop people from wanting to be free. It's just not going to happen. People will fight with their hands if they need to, as the Palestinians did initially. They fought with rocks. They fought with stones. Like there will always be people that have an undying need, a totally understandable need for freedom, emancipation. The only thing that will stop this is either the complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians or the dissolution of the Israeli apartheid. So a senior Hamas official told Dropsite that the Palestinian negotiators have faced an unprecedented pressure from Arab and Islamic mediators over the past 48 hours to make significant concessions and to quickly reach an agreement on the aspects of Trump's plan that address the exchange of captives, a ceasefire, and the resumption of aid. The source close to negotiators said that as a part of the agreement, aid deliveries will resume at levels consistent with the January 2025 ceasefire deal. Israel unilaterally abandoned that agreement in March when it imposed a full-spectrum blockade on Gaza, resumed its campaign of terror bombings, and subsequently unleashed a ground invasion of Gaza City in August. The source said 600 trucks of aid per day would enter Gaza under the new agreement. What the United Nations has said in the past is the minimum amount needed in Gaza. Israel released roughly 2,000 Palestinians it is holding captive in its prisons and military camps. The bulk of these will consist of Palestinians taken from Gaza after October 7 and will include all women and children. In Trump's original plan presented on September 29th, Israel would also free 250 Palestinians sentenced to life terms. There are ongoing negotiations over the exact number of Palestinians to be released and which, if any, of the most high-profile Palestinian resistance figures serving life sentences in Israel might be freed. Hamas has consistently demanded freedom for Marwan Barghouti, what a lot of people refer to as like the Palestinian Nelson Mandela. However, he is the single most popular Palestinian political leader whom Israel has sentenced to 5 life terms in 2004. And Marwan Barghouti is a more popular figure in the eyes of all Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, than Hamas ever could be, for the record. So that's something to consider here, especially when looking at, especially looking at this from the perspective of Hamas just simply wants to remain in power. Hamas simply wants to remain in power. If they wanted to, they would never demand the release of Marwan Barghouti. They would just never do that. Because someone like Marwan Barghouti actually threatens their grip of power, right? Here's Jacob Magid, U.S. Bureau Chief, Times of Israel. Hamas is committed to securing release of Marwan Barghouti as a part of the deal to end the Gaza war. Source familiar tells Times of Israel. Hamas's leadership has relayed to interlocutors that Barghouti's fate remains absolutely central to these talks, the source says. Barghouti is currently serving a life sentence in Israeli prison for planning attacks during the Second Intifada that killed 5 civilians. He has denied the charges against him while rejecting the Israeli court's jurisdiction. If you recall, Itamar Ben-Gvir went to the prison that Marwan Barghouti is being held hostage at and actually brought him out to and humiliated him or tried to humiliate him. The 66-year-old has been described as a potential successor to the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, as he has appealed among broad swaths of the Palestinian population while maintaining support for a two-state solution. Israelis, of course, say, no way. We saw what happened with Sinwar. Israeli Minister Ron Dermer, who recently co-ordered the assassination of Hamas leader Khalil al-Hayya with Netanyahu, now sits face-to-face at the negotiating table in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. That is a crazy pig. The guys on this side of the fucking table, quite literally, not even a month ago, ordered the assassination of the guys on this side of the table. Straight up. And what's really shocking, or what's really remarkable about this, is that the guys on that side of the table used to be different guys. Israel killed the other guys. So now these are the guys. Well, some of them were supposed to be on the table regardless, but isn't that fucking nuts? Yeah, just remember that next time someone tries to fucking tell you like Israel wanted a ceasefire. It was always Hamas that's like fucking up the bag, fucking up the ceasefire. It's like they have killed, they've killed the immediate relatives of the people on that side of the table too, by the way. Like straight up annihilated their entire families. Hamas has also advocated for the release of Ahmed Sadat, General Secretary of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and Abdullah Barghouti, a senior commander of the Qassam Brigades, who was sentenced in 2003 to 67 life terms, the longest sentence ever imposed on a Palestinian by Israel. In addition to the 20 living Israeli captives, there are believed to be 28 deceased. Hamas officials have said that some of these bodies are buried under rubble of buildings or tunnels bombed by Israel or in areas currently under Israeli military control, and that it will take time to retrieve them. Hamas official told DropSite that an agreement will be made that would provide more time to recover the bodies of captives. Now, this is one of the reasons why you logistically have to stop the bombing. This is something that I brought up in previous ceasefire arrangements where Israel was like, no, we don't want to stop the bombing, but you also have to give us the hostages. And everyone was like, you can't even do that. Like, how are we supposed to extract the fucking hostages when you are bombing everything, including the hostages? On Wednesday, Trump dispatched his son-in-law, oh, here we go, Jared Kushner, a special envoy Steve Witkoff, to the Egyptian resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh to try and secure a deal. The Israeli delegation is headed by Ron Dermer, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Minister of Strategic Affairs. Trump said today, in anticipation of a deal, he would likely travel to the region, maybe Sunday. Trump had given Hamas and Israel a deadline of Friday to complete the negotiations. He is very eager for the Nobel Peace Prize, and therefore he wants the problem solved today or tomorrow so that the vote will be in his favor for receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, Abu Marzouk told DropSite. Hamas leader Khalil al-Hayya, who survived an Israeli assassination attempt in Doha, Qatar on September 9th, literally 1 month ago, is heading Hamas's negotiation team, sitting across from the guys who ordered his assassination. The top political negotiator for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Mohammed al-Hindi, is also directly participating in the talks, as is a representative of the left-wing Party for the Liberation of Palestine. Saraya al-Quds Force is the second largest armed resistance faction in Gaza, holds an undisclosed number of Israeli captives, along with those in the custody of Hamas's Qassam brigades. Earlier on Wednesday, Ziad al-Nakale, the Secretary General of PIJ, appeared in a rare video address. The resistance is engaged in fierce negotiating battle under what is called the Trump Plan, which also carries within it the declaration that the Palestinians should completely surrender to the enemy. Even so, the resistance has shown its willingness to negotiate on the basis that there are clauses that can be dealt with positively, first among them the prisoner exchange clause, which could be completed in the coming few days, al-Nakale said. But we must be prepared to confront the enemy's possible attempts to turn the negotiations into an entry point for the surrender of our people and our resistance. The enemy and its allies must know that we cannot submit to their terms and dictates after all the price and sacrifices that our heroic people have paid. Hamas sources have made clear to DropSite that they believe the only path to a brokered agreement to end the genocide rests with Trump. The alternative is an indefinite continuation of the armed struggle against the U.S.-backed Israeli military. There is no other deal to be taken. Either this or return to fight with full American support coupled with Arab and Islamic passivity and letdown, said the source close to the negotiators. He said that while the deal is problematic, it contains some terms that Hamas and other Palestinian factions pushed for in their response to Trump, including deferring major issues that would alter the future of Gaza and Palestine itself. No surrender, no disarming, no mass exile, but most of all, a permanent end to the war to be announced by Trump. When Hamas offered its official response to Trump's 20-point plan last Friday, the movement's leadership took the position that it only had a mandate to enter into a deal on issues directly related to the Gaza war, but it asserted that negotiations on the bulk of Trump's proposal, which contains sweeping terms that will impact the future governance of Gaza, including demilitarizing and disarming Gaza and the deployment of foreign troops, would require the involvement of all Palestinian factions, not just Hamas. All of these issues, including Israel's demand that Hamas and other Palestinian resistance groups surrender their weapons in Gaza, will be deferred to future negotiations. So that is, it seems like Hamas is saying yes to the first phase, which is just the complete release of all of the prisoners of war and perhaps not just the prisoners of war, but also the killed Israelis as well. What makes you think that Trump is the actual person pushing Israel to the table? I I don't trust Trump and I don't trust Israel. I do trust the resistance forces in terms of like knowing what's knowing what's best for them, right? And therefore, I assume that they're seeing something different in the way that this has in the way that this has been conducted, and that is the reason why they're conceding to the first phase without getting assurances, or maybe they did get assurances for the second phase, if we are to use the terminology that was utilized in the previous negotiations, right? I'm literally reading this article right now. Chatters, you are sending me the Twitter thread from Jeremy Scahill. Weak assumption is not real, and the U.S. have reneged on deals plenty of times during the 2 years of genocide. I don't think you guys are understanding what I am saying, okay? You are misunderstanding what I am saying. I'm not saying I trust Israel or I trust America to abide by this deal. I'm saying that I'm assuming that the Palestinian resistance leadership has seen something different from at least the American side that gives them more confidence to abide by, more confidence to say yes to the first phase of this ceasefire negotiation. This does not mean that Israel will not turn around and violate it as they have done so in prior ceasefire negotiations, either ceasefire negotiations that they never actually implemented or even ceasefire negotiations that they did implement and then didn't follow on and reneged and continued bombing Palestinians. I suspect that there is something similar here as well. I suspect, judging by what Israel has done in the past, that this is how they will operate, that they will, somehow find a way to fucking turn around and blame this on Hamas again and then continue bombing once they extract all the hostages, because the hostages were seen as like a political hurdle that they must clear, right? That's what I think. Has Hamas been in direct contact with Trump for the latest negotiations? I seems so, yeah. The next round of negotiations will be very tricky, but going back to the genocide will not be easy, even though it's probable, said the source close to the Palestinian negotiators. The internal calculus among the lead negotiators, he said, was the cost-benefit analysis would favor accepting it. The next negotiations must be conducted in a very smart way. Perhaps the reason why they're doing it is because of what Israel states, which is that the idea that they have consistently pummeled Gaza and it killed far too many people, and therefore Hamas's calculation here is like they can't take it anymore. They can't, and that's the reason why they're conceding to everything. Maybe that's the reason. However, there is no assurances that Israel will stop bombing regardless. So. Anyway, Scahill, Hamas knew the only path to a brokered agreement to end the genocide rested with Trump. There is no other deal to be taken, either this or return to the fight with full American support coupled with Arab and Islamic passivity and letdown, said the source. I mean, but that has been the case. That has been the fucking case. Why do you keep saying Google Jeremy Scahill? How come when you look up Jeremy Scahill on Google, it says Premium Bandai as his name? What are you saying? I don't know, man. What the fuck is going on in this chat today? Breaking from Trump. He has finally announced it. I am very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. This means that all the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable, everlasting peace. All parties will be treated fairly. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations, and the United States of America. And we thank the meteors from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey who work with us to make this historic and unprecedented event happen. Blessed are the peacemakers. Yeah, also, Hamas did technically beat Donald Trump to the announcement by revealing this information to drop site. But, that's neither here nor there. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Please read previous message. Palestinian here. Remind chat not to infantilize our armed resistance as they're fully aware and have decades of experience about what Israel Israel's goals and tactics are, as well as the United States. I'm sure they're fully prepared in the case that Israel blows up these negotiations as well. Do not forgive. We have been dealing with these ethnic supremacists for over 77 years. Yes, but that's the only reason why I said I don't have any confidence in Israel. I don't have any confidence in America, but I do have confidence in the leaders of the resistance movement making the correct calculation. They recognize that it's a gamble, but if they're taking this approach, if they're agreeing to this decision, then very clearly, this is probably there's more confidence
from Washington, D.C.
on their
Alan,
side.
So we're
somehow.
all waiting on tenterhooks for news of this, and news that Trump has now posted on his Truth social media saying we have a deal. What are you seeing and hearing there at the White House?
This has been building, particularly over the last couple of hours, when Donald Trump, in a meeting at the White House, said he just stepped away from a call with his team that were in Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh, and he was encouraged by the progress that had been made and thought there would be an announcement soon. Talked about heading to the Middle East at the weekend. That may now be brought forward. It appears that the outline of a deal has been done. Donald Trump, on his Truth social platform, has, just in the last couple of minutes, said, "I'm very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. This means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable and everlasting peace. All parties will be treated fairly. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations, and the United States of America. And we want to thank mediators from Qatar, Egypt and Turkey who worked with us to make this historic and unprecedented event happen. Blessed are the peacemakers." President Donald J. Trump. So after hours of speculation that this was going to happen, that we were edging closer, that there was more optimism than there has been at any point in the last 2 years, it appears that Donald Trump and his 20-point plan and the pressure that he has exerted, not just on Hamas and on Israel, but on others in the region, appears to have delivered a peace deal which should mean an end to the war on Gaza.
Yeah, and Alan, obviously the executive word here, or phrase, being the first phase of the peace plan. Are any more details emerging about what parts of Trump's 20-point plan they have a deal on? Because it's unlikely, as you say, that everything's been agreed to.
Well, most of the details, of course, will still be in Sharm el-Sheikh. Donald Trump will have been given the details of what has actually happened. Nothing has been made public from Washington, D.C., but it's clear that there was...
What we will find out, it's going to take time until we know. It's going to take time until we know if this is this is conclusive. It's going to take some time. What I mean by that is where we need to see how Israel operates after the hostages are released. I could totally see Israel just taking all the hostages and then continuing its bombing, refusing to actually release the Palestinian hostages that they've taken, and then they'll just come up with a bullshit reason as to how Donald Trump actually violated this deal, and that and the United States will go along with it. And they'll say, that's right. This is what happened. I can see that being the situation.
Nothing new happened in Gaza. The offensive continued, the bombings continued, and the deaths continued. Now there is an outline of a peace deal. The pressure will be on Israel to stop doing what they have been doing in Gaza for the last 2 years and stop the offensive, which has claimed more than 65,000 lives.
Yeah, Alan, and Trump says that he will head to the Middle East this weekend. How much pressure did that put on Hamas and Israel, and indeed the negotiators, to get this deal across the line?
Well, I don't think there was that much pressure from the president. I think that was always there. And certainly there was a consensus among the countries who were represented in the talks in Sharm el-Sheikh, excuse me, and the wider community, that a deal had to be done and agreed quite quickly. Donald Trump was talking about possibly flying out
Yes,
on
Abu
Saturday
Bakr
night or
Abed,
Sunday. That then
who
changed
now
with a
is in
statement from the
Ireland,
White House in the
but
last
he's
couple
a
of
sports
hours,
commentator
saying
from
that
Data
he
of
would
the
have
Law,
an annual medical on Friday, and sometime after
celebrating
that,
this
very
decision, which
short
gives me more
order was the
confidence as
phrase
well.
that was used, he would head to the Middle East. So that suggested that it would be at some point on Friday. Now that a deal has been done, that everyone is in Egypt, there's every possibility that the president will head to the Middle East much sooner than Friday morning, because of course he's very keen to be seen to be the driving force behind this, and to a large degree he has been. No one was talking about peace talks. The Israelis had killed negotiators from Hamas, both in Tehran and also attempted to do that in Doha. There was a concern that everything was kind of locked. Donald Trump then had a meeting with senior officials from Muslim nations and Middle East countries at the United Nations General Assembly. He said that would perhaps be an important meeting, and from that came the outline of this 20-point plan, which he officially unveiled on September the 29th when Benjamin Netanyahu was back at the White House. So it appears that there has been enough negotiation for the US president to announce that phase one has been agreed. And of course, this is now all about sequencing. And we've seen that before in a number of peace processes around the world. My personal experience is in Northern Ireland that if you do this, then we do that. And when you do this, we'll follow with that. So that has all got to be agreed. So the first phase seems to be in place. What happens next will maybe be subject to further negotiation, but it appears that Donald Trump has delivered what he said he would deliver very quickly after his election way back in January, and that is a ceasefire in the war on Gaza.
Alan, just a final thought to you before you go, and obviously we'll come back to you throughout the night. There is even talk, perhaps, of Trump visiting Gaza itself. It's not confirmed yet. This is just something that's being reported. If that did happen, though, Alan, it would be pretty much unprecedented, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. It would need a great deal of a huge security operation. I'm not entirely sure that the Secret Service, who protect Donald Trump, would be keen on that idea. He would go in with the Israeli defense.
They're going to give a Nobel Peace Prize to Hamas after all of this. Trump is going to bomb the Nobel Peace Prize committee.
Excuse me. That might not be the optics, but then Donald Trump has never been too much concerned about optics that may be read a different way from everyone else. It would be a huge logistical and security operation, although it is possible. While foreign journalists have not been allowed in Gaza, the Israelis have made accommodation for those that they think will help put their side of the story, and allowed the journalists in under a huge security cordon. So it's possible that that could be expanded and delivered by Donald Trump. And there may be a welcome for Donald Trump from the Palestinian side, because after 2 years of constant war, a US president seems to have found...
I'm reading from other sources as well, from Hakan Fidan, the Turkish minister, who was also involved in these peace talks, right? He says the Gaza plan includes many details, but our priority now is to start the ceasefire and release the prisoners. Netanyahu always has an alternative plan to disrupt the negotiations, but I do not think he has much room to maneuver this time. Agreement on a ceasefire in Gaza will allow the start and the expansion of the entry of humanitarian aid. I don't know. I don't know if that is the case. Netanyahu says, with God's help, we will bring them all home after Trump announces first phase of Israel-Hamas deal. These are the first words that have come from Benjamin Netanyahu on the deal. I think the sticky point on this is who gets to control the Gaza Strip. That's the sticky point. Is it Palestinians, or is it going to be Palestinians, or is it going to be Tony Blair and Donald Trump, even if we're getting real crazy with it, right? Because Donald Trump wants it to be Donald Trump and Tony fucking Blair, which is ridiculous, right? It's completely unacceptable. I mean, it's completely unacceptable. We'll see.
Negotiations going on, very strong one to get to this point where the announcement made by, or the post made by Donald Trump about reaching an agreement between Hamas and Israel. But at least for phase one, which is the handing over the captives and then the withdrawal to an agreed upon line as a first step, a preliminary step for further negotiations and further agreements. It is just, I'm sure if we talk to people now, the reaction would be very, very excited, very happy it happened. At least they are distancing away from the anxiety that had engulfed all of their feelings throughout the day, and hope for what was going to happen. The level of anxiety is less, and the sense that we are going in the right direction, at least for now. And we're going to wait until we talk to people. So we'll see what's going to happen in the coming hours.
Yeah, Hani, we still have a long way to go, as this is just phase one of Trump's peace plan. I mean, this must be pretty emotional for you. You've been covering this story now for 2 years. With many people close to starving because Israel's siege and war on the Strip, many with nowhere to live, what are people's immediate needs on the ground now, Hani?
It will be definitely the sufficient free flow of aid, because people are still living through famine. And the past few days, it has started to be more aggressive in Gaza as the Israeli military extended the offensive and prevented the entry of food. It shut down and blocked completely the northern crossing, leaving people at a very difficult position. Prices were started to skyrocket once again. Depletion in the market, stalls were empty, reminding us of the past 3 months of the enforced starvation and dehydration, to the point where the IPC report announced that there was a famine going on, and famine has been confirmed there. People are still living the byproducts of this across the Strip here in central area. Anywhere you go, you walk in the market, in the street, you will find items, you will find the products, but these are not necessarily what people need to survive. We talk about fish produce that are not available. We talk about sources of protein and vitamins that are not available. So one thing to start with is the free flow of humanitarian, commercial aid, food supplies, water supplies.
Brother, you said, I hope they hunt down Yasser Abu Shabaab when this is all over. I'm going to keep it very real with you. I think there is a higher likelihood that Israel by force makes Yasser Abu Shabaab the head of whatever like fake military that exists, and they'll put people like Ahmed Fuad al-Khatib in charge of like the peace the peace commission and council, and like and the son of Hamas guy will be like leading the Gaza peace committee. It's fucking ridiculous.
The hazardous when it comes to safety, very dangerous for them, but they had no other choice. For them, it was better than sleeping on the streets or the pavement. So these are the conditions that people are waiting for to happen and to improve. Remember, on the first phase of the ceasefire, the Israeli military deliberately blocked the entry of tents and other infrastructure and elements needed to build proper shelters, including the entry of mobile homes that was prevented by the Israeli military. So this time people are more hopeful that these are the priorities. Particularly, we are going near to a winter season, and soon enough you will find a lot of people are searching desperately for a proper shelter from the cold weather, from the rain, and from everything that is could be affecting their livelihood and their safety. These are the important things right now for people. But the most important element right now is that you gradually regain that sense of safety. You can walk around the block, you walk on the street, not worried about these unpredictable falling bombs. Because as of this moment, I can tell you, at least in the area where I'm at, there's no drone buzzing in the background. I'm not sure about Gaza City, but here I'm not.
Oh, yeah, I saw this. Actually, a couple days ago, 5 prominent members of the Yasser Abu Shabaab gang turned themselves into resistance. Israel refused to include the ISIS link to gang into the IDF tracking unit, and then informed them in the case this truce goes through that they will not protect the criminal gang. Oh, that's interesting.
Hearing any, and definitely not
Destruction. It must seem really strange now that the silence must be deafening, Hani.
It's unusually quiet, to be honest with you. For the past 731 days, it became part of the daily routine, daily life. I know it's wrong to say this. It shows how much psychologically we've been damaged by this war machine, by the genocidal acts, that a quieter night is unusual for all of us here, because right away you think.
There is more information coming out of Drop Site only a minute ago from the Qatar side that was also involved in the deal making here. Let me pull that up really quickly. Hamas has also released a statement that like the release of Barghouti is essential. I covered that already. Marwan Barghouti, for those of you who don't know. And new from Drop Site, Qatar's foreign ministry announced that mediators reached an agreement on all the provisions and implementation mechanisms of the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Unlike Trump's announcement, Qatar's statement explicitly says the agreement will lead to ending the war alongside the release of Israeli and Palestinian captives and the entry of aid. The details will be announced later, spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry says. I mean, it seems hopeful, and we do definitely need a little bit of hope.
Remind our viewers who are just joining us here on Al Jazeera again of the dire, the disastrous humanitarian situation in Gaza during the war and the amount of
Hamas
aid
has released an additional statement after Donald Trump's release of the Truth Social, his Truth Social post. Hamas has released an additional statement that says, after responsible and serious negotiations conducted by the movement and the Palestinian resistance factions aiming to reach a ceasefire to stop the extermination war against our Palestinian people and the withdrawal of the occupation strip, the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, announces reaching an agreement to end the war on Gaza, the withdrawal of the occupation from it, the entry of aid and the exchange of prisoners. We call on Trump, the guarantor countries of the agreement, and various Arab, Islamic, and international parties to obligate the occupation government to fully implement the agreement's entitlements and not allow it to renege or delay the application of what has been agreed upon. We salute our great people in the Gaza Strip, Jerusalem, the West Bank, inside and outside the homeland, who recorded unprecedented stances of dignity, heroism, and honor, and confronted the fascist occupation projects targeting them and their national rights. These great sacrifices and stances that foiled the Israeli occupation's plans for subjugation and displacement. We affirm that the sacrifices of our people will not be in vain, and that we will remain committed to the pledge, and we will not abandon our people's national rights until freedom, independence, and self-determination are achieved. For those of you who always were duped early on in the aftermath of October 7, that Hamas actually has in its 1988 charter, even before they fully formed as a political movement and a political organization, that they wanted to purge all the Jews from the land of Israel. Hamas, since I believe 2017, has fully fleshed out a new charter that actually abides by a two-state solution as long as there is full-blown sovereignty for the Palestinian population. Obviously, a big part of the deal, a big part of achieving full-blown sovereignty would require having a standing military and also unlimited pathways for trade
the impact of,
in and out of the Gaza Strip.
That has created irreversible damage that for people who suffer from malnutrition now inside hospitals, even if food is available, they need much better care now, much more high-level intervention, medical intervention, in order to survive these conditions. And we talk about the children who might have problems when it comes to physical growth or intellectual growth. All of these things need to be addressed immediately in order to save the society. Without this, we're going to be seeing more decline over the coming months, but unless that is addressed properly.
Hani, let me just get a final thought to you. I know we'll be talking to you throughout the night, of course. Gaza has faced utter destruction. I mean, most of the Strip is now unlivable as we're looking at these pictures of the destruction we're talking to you. How do people go about returning to their lives and their livelihoods? What are the challenges they'll now face on the ground, Hani?
Darren, one of the biggest challenges we happen to be speaking to people today about this is it's not just to have been experiencing this massive psychological damage, that non-stop attacks and the trauma that keep evolving in each passing day, but also the fact that they're losing parts of their history, part of their memories, part of where they grew up. You know, when I walk sometimes, see those gray shades of the rubble and the ruins. My mind always tried to imagine that these were colorful, people were laughing here, people gathered at these corners of the streets or inside these little shops or behind the walls where families gather around dining tables. That does not exist anymore. So it's not just the physical destruction that was so heavy on people, but also the psychological level, particularly those who lost family members and they happen to be the only survivors after these attacks. They are the only ones finding now all of their family members were killed. All of this together has a very difficult impact on people at rebuilding shattered lives. And when we say shattered life, it's literally shattered, because not only family been scattered across the strip, but they're gone missing. They were killed. They've been in hospitals for a long time. They people for months now, 2 years exactly. Few of the families managed to be together on a dining table, but everybody else.
Oh my God.
The strip, either because they lost someone or the family happened to be.
Oh, fuck. Predictably, following a lull over the last few days, a large wave of strikes now by the Israeli Air Force against Gaza City with a ceasefire agreement to go into effect roughly 10 hours at 12. Oh, how many children will Israel slaughter up until the last second? This is how Israel operates, by the way. And we know this because there have been many ceasefires that have taken place. This is, weirdly enough, this is not in an incredibly twisted way. Israel's intensifying bombing campaigns actually does mean a ceasefire is imminent, because that's how they fucking operate. They've done this with the Iranian ceasefire. They've done this with the Lebanon ceasefire, which, by the way, they still bombed Lebanon. Like, they bombed Lebanon and killed American citizens like a couple months ago. This is when Israel starts intensifying its bombing campaign, that means a fucking ceasefire is coming. It is so fucked up, but that is how they operate. No, they're not trying to force Hamas' response to undermine the process. This is just how they always work. This is how they've always done it. Every single time. And we have tracked every single one of these ceasefires that took place. Short term, long term, doesn't matter. And in every single circumstance, Israel has always done this. Right until the last moment they can, they will try to get as many kills as they possibly can. And right now, in the Strip, Palestinians are out in the streets fucking celebrating because they think, that this ceasefire will finally be complete, that they believe that it's actually going to happen. So I could see them just unleashing on, in a last act of cruelty, unleashing upon a civilian population that is going outside for the first time ever, and with the hopes that maybe tomorrow there won't be fucking drones overhead. Senior American official says to Barak Ravid, the war in Gaza has ended. The hostages will be released in 72 hours after the Israeli cabinet approves the agreement. The assessment is that this will happen at the latest on Monday. Didn't they do this with the last temporary ceasefire? Yes, they did. They did this in Lebanon too. They did this with Iran. They always do this shit, okay? How much they can get away with is entirely dependent on what kind of a military deterrent the opposition has, for the record. And the only reason why they were forced to stop with Iran was America, because America said no more. Trump literally said he made the planes turn around. He said he made the planes fucking turn around. They were trying to do a last-second bombing campaign again. And a big part of the reason why he made the planes turn around wasn't because, he really he really loves Iran or something. It's because Iranian missiles had unironically eroded the defenses of Israel. We found out after the fact, but the suspicion was there. Something I also speculated on was that Israel and America was actually running out of their munition stock, and at a quite a faster pace than they initially suspected. They were also having a hard time intercepting certain missiles. This is precisely the real reason why they fucking stopped. Any news on allowing in international journalists? I mean, we're not at that stage yet. We'll get there. But the stage that we're in currently is hopefully the bombing
Palestinians who
ends.
died of starvation as a result of Israel's siege. So you had all of these policies that built up the international pressure on Israel. But each time there was this growing international pressure, something else came up. There was a war with Hezbollah. There was a war with Iran. There were strikes in Yemen. There were strikes in Syria. All of this was in the last 2 years, and we've been reporting on it constantly. But the international pressure on the Israelis did not wane.
Okay, the Abu Shabab thing is pretty funny. Abu Shabab, who is the head of who is a drug trafficker and an ISIS affiliate, who was in Palestinian prison until Israel broke him out, and then used him as the popular forces, the one that has that famous AI-made symbol, has officially revealed that he has no control or no protection for his own troops. Abu Shabab says, we asked the IDF to integrate us into the army, but they told us they couldn't. Also informed by the officers that the army wouldn't be able to protect them because any military action to protect them would be considered a violation of the existing agreement. RP Bozo to Yasser Abu Shabab. Every single thing that Israel said that Hamas was doing, those motherfuckers were doing with Israel's permission and with Israel's aerial support. Okay? Stealing aid, selling it at an incredibly high markup, straight up overtaking convoys of humanitarian aid. Every single thing that Israel claimed Hamas was doing, Yasser Abu Shabab and his popular forces were doing. They were operating out of the red zone in Rafah in an area where it's kill on sight. If you are a Palestinian in that area, the Israeli government assassinates you. Okay, no questions asked. The only Palestinians that were allowed to operate in that area and run around with their guns was Yasser Abu Shabab's gang, the popular forces. How dare you say something about such an amazing man, despite the fact that he's illiterate? He's an article writer for big newspapers. That's true. Dropped out of second grade, I believe, has a second grade education, is not literate in Arabic, but was capable of writing op-eds for the Wall Street Journal, famously. Yasser Abu Shabab. I already read this. Can you please explain why we aren't acting like this is another pressure valve so libs will shut up and they can keep bombing? The only reason why I'm saying that is because of this. Look, this is the reason, because Hamas isn't saying that. Like, they see something different. They are involved in the talks. They are just as skeptical as I am they are just as skeptical as I am about Israel and America. I still suspect that the ceasefire deal will look exactly like the January one, because like even the phrases that they are using here, phase 1, phase 2, identical, right? It's fucking identical. They're literally saying, oh, just release the remaining hostages and then we'll get into phase 2 where we do permanent withdrawal. Leftists will never stop talking over brown people. No, that's not what this is. That's not what this is. I do suspect that I've already told you, I suspect that this will look like the previous ceasefires where like they get the hostages out and then they immediately start bombing, and they can use two different reasons. Israel will most likely, if I'm being like highly skeptical of this deal, okay, the only thing that gives me confidence here is that the militia movements, the resistance movements have agreed, right? But if I were to see this deal fall apart, it would absolutely obviously be on the Israeli side, but the deal would fall apart on the basis of Israel, one, claiming that Hamas did not give all the hostages back, especially the ones who have been killed, right? They'll say, oh, they couldn't recover all the dead hostages, so that's a violation of the deal. And then two, they'll say Hamas is not giving up their arms. Those, I think, will be the two things that people will, like Israel will use to undermine the ceasefire negotiations and then continue blowing shit up. At least that's precisely what has taken place in the past. So I have no reason to believe anything different will take place now. But as I have repeated over and over again, the only thing that gives you confidence here is clearly the fact that the resistance movement is in agreement. They're seeing something that we are not. And I don't know if they're doing this calculation because they're like, enough is enough. They have nothing left. Or if they're doing this calculation because they do think that the American deal is sincere.
I'll take a few questions.
Netanyahu releases a statement in Hebrew. Let's take a look. Prime Minister Netanyahu, unofficial translation for Hebrew below. A great day for Israel. Tomorrow I will convene the government to approve the agreement and bring all of our beloved hostages home. I extend my gratitude to the brave IDF soldiers and all the security forces whose courage and sacrifice have brought us to this day. I offer my heartfelt thanks to President Trump and his team for their dedication to this sacred mission of freeing our hostages. With God's help, together we will continue to achieve all our goals and enhance peace with our neighbors. I mean, I don't get it. He could have done this at any point. This doesn't make sense. He could have released all the hostages at any point. Hamas literally on October 10th said that they would do a full release of hostages for the hostages that Israel has. And also if Israel doesn't enter the Gaza Strip. So October 10th, 2023, by the way. So that's what I'm saying. Why now? I don't know. Maybe Trump made the secret boss call, or maybe either Trump made the secret boss call, or Israel will violate this ideal, a side agreement where they will be allowed to violate this again. Let's take a look at this guy's an Israeli negotiator.
This is a great day for Israel, but you know the devil's in the detail. We're still waiting details of what exactly has been agreed. But let me ask you, what does this mean for Israel, and in particular the families of the captives?
Well, one absolutely has to hope that this is going to be seen through to implementation. Of course, monumentous for those being held who are Israeli, for their families, who had largely given up that their government gave a damn, to be honest. And of course, for the people in Gaza who faced daily atrocities, killings, war crimes, starvation, and indeed for the Palestinian families and for those being held in Israeli prisons who will now see freedom. But that depends, first of all, on this initial arrangement being implemented. But Darren, we are not on our first rodeo here, and if history is any guide, and just judging by what Netanyahu said already that contradicts what is in the deal, and depending on what he tells his coalition allies, is he going to be saying, for instance, to Ben Gvir and Smotrich, you can dislike this, maybe you vote against, maybe you even quit, but don't bring down the government? Because, and this is really important, and I think those Israelis who are hoping this comes to an end will know that Netanyahu has reneged on these deals in the past and may well be looking for the first opportunity to be able to resume hostilities when he can in Gaza. In the meantime, one should absolutely expect that the destruction, the displacement, the killing in the West Bank will continue. We saw Ben Gvir on Al-Aqsa today, and one should also assume that whatever the initial arrangement, whatever the initial line of Israeli military withdrawal ends up being, that is where it will end. Because I think once the hostages are returned, one should fully expect that Israel will not withdraw further. One should fully expect that Israel will go back to playing this game of how can we make it as hard as possible for the international aid, humanitarian assistance so desperately needed to get into Gaza. And we will be in this game of stop, start. Will Israel try and use these armed militias that it has supported in Gaza to cause mayhem? So I think the first thing is, can we get this initial phase over the line? But then everyone should absolutely expect that this is going to be an extremely bumpy road, apparently with no guarantees.
Yeah, and of course, after 2 years of war, Daniel, many Israelis argue that this could have all been achieved some time ago. And of course, Netanyahu, as you say, has wriggled out of all previous attempts to get a ceasefire.
Well, he has, and we know
Every single thing that Israel claimed Hamas was doing, Yasser Abu Shabab and his popular forces were doing. They were operating out of the red zone in Rafah in an area where It's kill on sight. If you are a Palestinian in that area, the Israeli government assassinates you. Okay, no questions asked. The only Palestinians that were allowed to operate in that area and run around with their guns was Yasser Abu Shabab's gang, the Popular Forces. How dare you say something about such an amazing man, despite the fact that he's illiterate? He's an article writer for big newspapers. That's true. Dropped out of second grade, I believe, has a second grade education, is not literate in Arabic, but was capable of writing op-eds for the Wall Street Journal, famously. Yasser Abu Shabab. I already read this. Can you please explain why we aren't acting like this isn't another pressure valve so libs will shut up and they can keep bombing? The only reason why I'm saying that is because of this. Look, this is the reason, because Hamas isn't saying that. Like, they see something different. They are involved in the talks. They are just as skeptical as I am they are just as skeptical as I am about Israel and America. I still suspect that the ceasefire deal will look exactly like the January one, because like even the phrases that they are using here, phase 1, phase 2, identical, right? It's fucking identical. They're literally saying, oh, just release the remaining hostages and then we'll get into phase 2 where we do permanent withdrawal. Leftists will never stop talking over brown people. No, that's not what this is. That's not what this is. I do suspect that, I've already told you, I suspect that this will look like the previous ceasefires where like they get the hostages out and then they immediately start bombing, and they can use two different reasons. Israel will most likely, if I'm being like highly skeptical of this deal, okay, the only thing that gives me confidence here is that the militia movements, the resistance movements have agreed, right? But if I were to see this deal fall apart, it would absolutely obviously be on the Israeli side, but the deal would fall apart on the basis of Israel, one, claiming that Hamas did not give all the hostages back, especially the ones who have been killed, right? They'll say, oh, they couldn't recover all the dead hostages, so that's a violation of the deal. And then two, they'll say Hamas is not giving up their arms. Those, I think, will be the two things that people will, like Israel will use to undermine the ceasefire negotiations and then continue blowing shit up. At least that's precisely what has taken place in the past. So I have no reason to believe anything different will take place now. But as I have repeated over and over again, the only thing that gives me confidence here is clearly the fact that the resistance movement is in agreement. They're seeing something that we are not. And I don't know if they're doing this calculation because they're like, enough is enough, they have nothing left, or if they're doing this calculation because they do think that the American deal is sincere.
I'll take a few questions.
Netanyahu releases a statement in Hebrew. Let's take a look. Prime Minister Netanyahu, unofficial translation for Hebrew below. A great day for Israel. Tomorrow I will convene the government to approve the agreement and bring all of our beloved hostages home. I extend my gratitude to the brave IDF soldiers and all the security forces whose courage and sacrifice have brought us to this day. I offer my heartfelt thanks to President Trump and his team for their dedication to the sacred mission of freeing our hostages. With God's help, together we will continue to achieve all our goals and enhance peace with our neighbors. I mean, I don't get it. He could have done this at any point. This doesn't make sense. He could have released all the hostages at any point. Hamas literally on October 10th said that they would do a full release of hostages for the hostages that Israel has. And also if Israel doesn't enter the Gaza Strip. So October 10th, 2023, by the way. So that's what I'm saying. Why now? I don't know. Maybe Trump made the secret boss call, or maybe either Trump made the secret boss call, or Israel will violate this ideal, a side agreement where they will be allowed to violate this again. Let's take a look at this guy's an Israeli negotiator.
This is a great day for Israel, but you know the devil's in the detail. We're still waiting details of what exactly has been agreed. But let me ask you, what does this mean for Israel and in particular the families of the captives?
Well, one absolutely has to hope that this is going to be seen through to implementation. Of course, monumentous for those being held who are Israeli, for their families, who had largely given up that their government gave a damn, to be honest. And of course, for the people in Gaza who faced daily atrocities, killings, war crimes, starvation, and indeed for the Palestinian families and for those being held in Israeli prisons who will now see freedom. But that depends, first of all, on this initial arrangement being implemented. But Darren, we are not on our first rodeo here, and if history is any guide, and just judging by what Netanyahu said already that contradicts what is in the deal, and depending on what he tells his coalition allies, is he going to be saying, for instance, to Ben Gvir and Smotrich, you can dislike this, maybe you vote against, maybe you even quit, but don't bring down the government? Because, and this is really important, and I think those Israelis who are hoping this comes to an end will know that Netanyahu has reneged on these deals in the past and may well be looking for the first opportunity to be able to resume hostilities when he can in Gaza. In the meantime, one should absolutely expect that the destruction, the displacement, the killing in the West Bank will continue. We saw Ben Gvir on Al-Aqsa today, and one should also assume that whatever the initial arrangement, whatever the initial line of Israeli military withdrawal ends up being, that is where it will end. Because I think once the hostages are returned, one should fully expect that Israel will not withdraw further. One should fully expect that Israel will go back to playing this game of how can we make it as hard as possible for the international aid, humanitarian assistance so desperately needed to get into Gaza. And we will be in this game of stop, start. Will Israel try and use these armed militias that it has supported in Gaza to cause mayhem? So I think the first thing is, can we get this initial phase over the line? But then everyone should absolutely expect that this is going to be an extremely bumpy road, apparently with no guarantees.
Yeah, and of course, after 2 years of war, Daniel, many Israelis argue that this could have all been achieved some time ago. And of course, Netanyahu, as you say, has wriggled out of all previous attempts to get a ceasefire.
Well, he has, and we know something that could have been brought to an end so much earlier. We don't know if it is now being brought to an end. And one of the crucial questions is, what happens next? Because when a genocide has been committed, if that is then paused, one doesn't normally say, that's fantastic, business as usual, everyone treat the perpetrators of that genocide as if nothing had happened. So we have to insist that accountability should be on the agenda. Netanyahu has an ICC arrest warrant against his name. When it comes to any possibility of rebuilding in Gaza, one should ask the question,
isn't this guy a former, he's a former Israeli negotiator, right?
That destruction, cause that destruction.
Am I crazy? Is he not?
To be paying compensation for their assets to be gone after in order to be able to pay for that. Should it be obvious that Gulf states, for instance, are going to have to put their hands in their pocket? I don't think they were the ones doing that destruction in Gaza. And then the much bigger question, which is the inherent instability of a situation. The unlikelihood, although we want to be optimistic tonight, Darren, the unlikelihood that you will actually see stability as long as you have a situation of ongoing occupation and apartheid is the choice between genocide and apartheid. Palestinians won't have their self-determination. The Trump 20 points set up some colonial economic governance structure for Gaza, but they don't actually come to terms and come to grips with this occupation and apartheid, with Palestinian self-determination. And as long as that is not addressed, then you will have the obliteration of Gaza, and you will still have a reality of Palestinians denied their basic rights, which can never be a recipe for security. So everyone is going to have to reassess, press a reset, and look at what we are left with in this situation. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's an important point you make, Daniel. I mean, some of the big sticking points for Israel will be when do Israeli troops start withdrawing, and of course to where those lines, and also to what extent does Hamas agree to disarm, and also of course the names of Palestinian prisoners to be released. Those, of course, big points for Israel. How much then has Israel really conceded to get this deal done?
Well, let's see the details, as you suggest, Darren. I think that the key point here is that Netanyahu didn't want to end this at all. And in that respect, one can expect him to perhaps try and make sure that there is still an Israeli military presence in Gaza. Remember, he has told us that the Israeli military will stay in Gaza, that there will be no Palestinian governance. So this is where things are going to be tested.
He won't even let Abbas run it, dude. And Abbas is a part of the Israeli security apparatus.
Actually, and I think we can expect Israeli military operations, violations of the sovereignty of other states to continue in Syria, in Lebanon, probably not where you are now, Darren, after the commitment to the President of the United States, but elsewhere in the region, and certainly in the occupied West Bank. So I think Netanyahu will try and sell a narrative. I didn't concede. Look what I've got. And I think Israeli society will slowly brush itself down and look at this and say, was it worth it? Perhaps it hasn't happened yet, but perhaps there will be an acknowledgement of what has been done. Unfortunately, consent around genocide has been manufactured in Israeli society. And I think what one has to question elsewhere is, will one see the media go in? Not your courageous reporters who've been there all along, wearing those vests that say press that really have afforded them no protection, sometimes the opposite. But will you see the rest of the world's media go in? And will we see that some of what has changed in terms of global Palestine, in terms of the pressure that has ramped up from civil society, from ordinary people to hold Israel to account, will that now
what I have
dissipate? Or is that going to continue?
That, like, once the dust is settled, people's opinions of Israel will get even worse.
Its usual modus operandi of impunity and of carrying on with its endless prevention of Palestinian rights. But I doubt that, actually. I think this desire to hold Israel to account, which is necessary if there's ever going to be peace, I think that will continue, especially, as I say, as some of the mainstream media that has been so negligent in doing its job, hasn't had people there, hasn't covered this enough, may now think, okay, we should do our job. We're going to have access to Gaza. And we'll see, unfortunately, I fear, we'll see the enormity, for those who weren't aware of it yet, of the destruction, the death, and the cruelty that has been inflicted on the Palestinian population there.
All right, Daniel Levy there, president of the US Middle East Project. For now, Daniel, I'm sure we'll come back to you later on in the morning, but for now, thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren.
Well, Hamas officials have also released a statement. It says the Islamic Resistance Movement announces the conclusion of an agreement to end the war on Gaza, ensure the withdrawal of the occupation, allow the entry of aid, and facilitate prisoner exchange. We call on President Trump, the states guaranteeing the agreement, and all Arab, Islamic, and international parties to hold the occupation government accountable to fully implement the agreement and prevent any evasion or delay in executing its commitments. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has released statements on X focused on the captives held in Gaza. He says, with God's help, we will bring them all home. I will convene the government tomorrow to approve the agreement and bring all our precious captives home. All right, well, Omar Rahman is a fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. Omar, always good to have you with us here on Al Jazeera. So Trump now says we have a deal. How much pressure then was Hamas, Israel, and indeed the negotiators under to get this deal across the line, especially with Trump saying he was going to fly to Egypt this weekend?
Good to be with you, Darren. I think all sides were under a lot of pressure. I certainly think the Israelis and Netanyahu weren't interested in this deal. They were hoping that Hamas would reject. And Hamas played it well, issuing that smart, well-crafted statement, accepting accepting the deal, but with some caveats. And they were, in something that was quite different than in the past. I think they were backed up by those Arab and Muslim states that had helped negotiate the initial proposal in terms of needing clarification, expressing some frustration and anger that the terms of the agreement that they had made on the sidelines of the UN had been changed so substantially by Netanyahu and then just announced by the Trump administration. So I think when they went back to the table, there was that pressure, including on Trump himself. And I think that's also something that's been different than in the past. That Trump, because of actually the blunder, really, of the Israelis to strike Qatar, and the outpouring of anger that came from the United States partners in the Middle East, especially from the Gulf, who Donald Trump holds in quite high regard. I think that put him on the back foot and made him change his tune and kind of understand that some recompense was necessary to placate those countries. And one of the demands they made was that Donald Trump take this ceasefire in Gaza seriously, work with them to come up with a proposal. And obviously, Hamas is under a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think they understand that at the moment, even though the agreement that was released was a hard pill to swallow, and these are obviously early days, this is breaking news, we don't know the details that were finally agreed upon, but what was announced by Trump and Netanyahu was a horrible deal. But at the end of the day, something needed to give in order to just seize an opportunity to end the slaughter, the starvation in Gaza. Came through in that statement that the priority number one is ending the suffering of those people in Gaza.
Yeah, Omar, that's an important point you make, because it's the mechanisms for the deal which are significant to ending the war, aren't they? The big issues here, the ceasefire timeline, of course, the withdrawal of Israeli forces and the exchange of prisoners. We still don't know much about the details yet, do we?
No, I mean, all we've heard are, the Qataris have made their statement that a deal was agreed to. Obviously, Trump made his statement on Truth Social. The Israelis have made a statement as well, but the details themselves have not been released. But the details have essentially been on the table for quite some time. Yes, they're negotiating over the terms of this 20-point proposal, which were left extremely vague with no timelines for withdrawal. Even the map that was released was, quite not a detailed one. So there were a lot of things to be worked out and ironed out. And I think obviously Netanyahu didn't want those details in there because the more vague it is, the more leeway Israel has to establish the framework and do what it wants to do ultimately. But we know that the major sticking points in the past in terms of ceasefire have been the terms of an Israeli military withdrawal and whether that would be in full or in part. And Netanyahu in this agreement wanted it in part and a permanent Israeli presence there, or at least one in which he could dictate the terms of that. And Hamas has always sought a full withdrawal of Israel. And there was also the issue of the terms of and the nature of Palestinian governance in the future of Gaza, which was a sticking point, and also of the future of Hamas and its disarmament and whether Hamas would live on inside of the Gaza Strip. So those are some of the things. But I think one thing that we should take note of is that everything Israel has to do can be reversed, right? So like the withdrawal, they can leave Gaza and they can come back in tomorrow. Releasing even prisoners, Palestinian prisoners and captives, they can rearrest, and they've done that many times in the past. So these things, everything Israel does can be reversed. Whereas Hamas, once it releases those hostages, they're gone forever. Once it gives up its guns, it's going to have a very hard time getting those back. And so this is the kind of fundamental underlying nature of the sticking points, that there's no guarantee, and there's a reliance on the United States to deliver Israel and hold it accountable and hold it to the terms of the agreement. And we've never really seen that before. Donald Trump has been less than reliable in terms of these negotiations. We saw in January, there was an agreement in place. We got through phase one, which released many hostages. And then when it came to phase two, in which Israel would have to start withdrawing its military from the West Bank, boom, they go in there and violate the agreement, and Trump goes along with it. And then we saw in the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran over the nuclear agreement, again, the U.S. played a role in kind of subterfuge and allowing the Israelis the element of surprise to go and attack Iran. So less than reliable there from Trump, but there's no real alternative here. If you want to stop the genocide, what other way is there to stop it? And Hamas knows that. It really has very few cards to play.
All right, Omar Rahman, fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Omar, always good to have you with us at times like this. We'll no doubt come back to you throughout the night, but for now, thank you.
I just think
Thanks.
Well, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson of Qatar, Dr. Majid Al-Ansari, has released
The
a
more I
statement.
look at this
The
deal,
mediator has announced that
the more I look at this deal, the more I look at the outline, the more I look at the broader points, the more I see the concessions that Hamas agreed to, the more I suspect that this was a position that they were forced into because they had no other options. I know there's a quote from the Palestinian negotiation team. I know, I read it. A source close to the Palestinian negotiation team tells Dropsite the agreement includes a permanent end to the war to be announced by Trump. He acknowledged the deal is problematic, but it contains some terms that Hamas and other Palestinian factions pushed for in their response to Trump, including deferring major issues that would alter the future of Gaza and Palestine itself. No surrender, no disarming, no mass exile, but most of all, a permanent end to the war to be announced by Trump, he noted. I think we covered this already, but I suspect that this is I hope that there is something that they've gotten out of the Trump administration that actually makes sense in terms of full-blown assurances, and it's not simply a matter of we have no other options and we can't sit here and allow more Palestinians to be fucking ruthlessly and mercilessly slaughtered in the interim because we just have no more willingness to fight. You know what I mean? But I don't understand how this would be in any way, shape, or form remotely different than the previous ceasefire deal. We, like you're one of them? What do you mean? What did I say? We are all anti-genocide. I assume you are also a part of the anti-genocide contingency. Maybe you're not. I don't know. It's hard not to feel jaded. How many previous ceasefires that we thought we had, though? Like, this one makes us different. The only thing I am saying here that is different is like Hamas's interpretation of events. They're saying that they trust the administration to do right. That's it. That's the only difference here.
Which is that Netanyahu is totally dependent on Trump.
But I still think, I still suspect it's a way to PR the genocide.
Did I say totally? Totally dependent on Trump. Which means Trump does not advise Netanyahu. He does not suggest and propose to Netanyahu. He orders Netanyahu what to do, because without Trump, Netanyahu will disappear from his political career. And I think part of the reason why this is a bit surprising how fast this deal was reached. It is true, as I said earlier this evening, that it is a deal about names and maps. It's not really a deal about much more than that. It's names of hostages, or rather prisoners, and maps as to where the Israeli forces will redeploy. So it is relatively easy than the bigger 20-point plan. And yet, the fact that it happened in such a short time.
2 years since Hamas attack on October 7th, former Israeli negotiator Daniel Levy says there has been an irreversible shift in public perception of Israel. On Trump's peace plan, he told Anna Koch, it feels like a proposition to impose a colonial structure on Palestinians. So maybe the only outside pressure here is for Trump to manage the public relations of Israel, to manage the public relations of Israel's genocide. It's not here to stop Israel's genocide. For that to be the goal, obviously Donald Trump would have to care about Palestinians. Donald Trump does not care about Palestinians. Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody. Donald Trump only cares about himself and Israel too, but, you know, because it has a close personal financial benefit to himself. He's transactional. He's narcissistic. And therefore, the only thing I can see here is that he's trying to at least like manage the PR of this genocide by being like, oh, we're done. No more war. No more war. And then they just basically legalize the permanent occupation and continue to slowly but surely engage in ethnic cleansing. Benjamin Netanyahu's obvious goals here are the Rafah plan. The Rafah plan is the one where they take all the Palestinians into a concentration camp in Rafah and then ethnically cleanse them from the land completely. There is a way to There is a way to potentially take the Rafah plan and merge it with the Tony Blair Gaza Riviera plan. But Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump. The two had a very moving and warm conversation and congratulated each other on the historic achievement in signing the agreement to release all the hostages. Bro, I don't understand. This is like such a Trumpian thing, you know? And I mean, like, Benjamin Netanyahu is doing the same thing that Trump does, in the sense that Trump does this thing all the time where he just like breaks something permanently. He bricks something permanently only to then fucking turn around and be like, well, see, I'm not breaking it any further. Don't you think you should credit me for your salvation? And it's like, well, you broke it, right? And Netanyahu is doing the exact same thing here. And I don't understand how people don't see it. It's like they're congratulating one another for the brave initiative that they took to end their genocide. Like, these are the two belligerent occupiers that have been conducting a genocide of the Palestinians. So they're like, finally, guys, we fucking did it. We did it. Aren't we great? They're just, you know, popping champagne and shit. And it's like, okay, you could have done this at any point. You could have done this at any point. I don't know. I can't help but feel like a part of this straight up is because a part of this hinges on the Nobel Peace Prize Committee announcement. Like, I'm not even kidding. I think it's delusional. I think the notion that like they deserve a peace prize for this is so fucking insane. And I think that would be a major fuck you to everyone with a brain, everyone with eyes, everyone with ears. It would be such a fuck you if they were like, Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, sir, here is a peace prize for you. Here's a Nobel Peace Prize for you for all your continued work in ending the genocide, which you began and started and continued to do. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. You're just constantly complaining. Brother, sister, the emperor, what can I do here? Should you not be complaining? If you're not complaining, if you're not frustrated, you're not paying attention. You know? I just don't understand it. They try their best, but it's hard to PR your way around mass murder. Why are the pro-Israel people so bad at their PR game, says Tim Pool. Here is Tim Pool trying to get a piece of that $7,000 a pop. $7,000 a pop from Israel. He's like, please pick me, sir.
Invited Trump, because now when Trump comes in and visits and he gives a certain leverage, a certain support to local, to regional players. And I think that's what they want. And that's why everyone else is getting involved in this process that Trump is leading. But as I said again, the point of this 20-point plan is to achieve Israel's.
Yeah. According to Israel Khan, Hebrew channel correspondent, today the war ends with an agreement. Everyone here was expecting an image of Hamas surrender and submission. The image we saw today, I don't think resembles that. Yeah, there's gonna be people, especially in Israeli society, which range from Hitler, which is the moderate position in Israeli society, to Super Hitler, which is the center-right position in Israeli society, to Itamar Ben-Gvir, also known as Omega Hitler. Right? So there's varying degrees of Hitler. So obviously there's going to be people that are frustrated with this, right? Like, there will be the Bibists, the Benjamin Netanyahu supporters that will probably try to play a role in the PR of this deal to be like, no, you don't understand. Like, we've completely dominated Hamas. Like, we actually got all of our wishes. We got it all. But on behalf of the Los Angeles Dog Safety and Protection Center, you will be under custody in 24 hours. Oh, brother. Okay, man. Yeah. I respect that they got at least a little creative with it. Yeah, it's true. That is a good joke. It's funny to think that like the fucking ASPCA is going to come to my house, knock down my door and be like, hey, we're taking the best taken care of dog in the motherfucking history of the United States of America. We're taking him away from the mansion that she lives in, and we're putting her in a fucking kill shelter. Bro, just saw this clip of you shocking your dog for getting up, you piece of shit. Okay. All right. One day at a time. The dog weirdos are coming at you before Israel and the U.S. government. No, the dog weirdos are half the time people who love the current U.S. government and certainly love Israel. It is not an accident. It's all the same folks. There are, of course, people, considering how bad the clip looks, I totally understand why there's like random people who love dogs. I'm a dog lover myself. Random people who see that and they go, "Oh my God," especially with the negative framing, and think that this is like a horrifying incident. Okay, and this showcases abuse. Having said that, it's primarily being pushed by, suspiciously, it's not being pushed by people who have been around me or Kaya, weirdly enough, and instead has been pushed by people who have developed a parasocial hatred towards me over the internet. Is your dog in a cage right now? You put your dog in a cage? No, my dog is with my mom. They keep saying your dog is a boy, like you can tell they don't know shit. I know. A lot of Twitter liberals are also spreading it, teaming up with the neo-Nazis, literally. I mean, that makes sense. There's a lot of people who fucking despise me on the internet. Many of them, if there is one thing that I would say unifies all of them, it's their hatred of the left and maybe even their love for Israel. I have to admit, if I were you and my friends didn't immediately come to my defense over this, I would be questioning their friendship, honestly. I'm sure people have already talked about it. But I also, guys, you know how this goes. There has been a sea of hatred, and the smear campaigns never really end. Sometimes it goes overboard, and other times it quiets down until the next wave. Okay, it is what it is, and why it is difficult for people to come out and be like, y'all are fucking crazy. I've been around this dog. She is well loved. Anyway, I will not be continuing this line of discussion any further.
Blessed are the peacemakers. Well, these are the latest scenes in the southern city of Khan Yunis in Gaza. Palestinians have heard the news and have taken to the streets to celebrate after 2 years of genocide. Let's just hear what's happening there in Khan Yunis. All right, let's bring back in Alan Fisher. Alan, as we were watching scenes of jubilation there in Khan Yunis from people in Gaza receiving news of this deal, for those viewers who are just joining us here, Alan, this all came out on Trump's social media post, Truth Social. Just remind us again what happened and how the news emerged.
It's clear that the Americans wanted to make sure that if there was a ceasefire deal announced, it was going to be announced by Donald Trump. And they would say that's only fair because things had really been locked up. There was no sign of any progress until Donald Trump presented his 20-point plan on the 29th of September after a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. You'll remember that the Israelis had targeted negotiators from Hamas in the past, including attacking them and killing them in Tehran, and also the attack in Doha in Qatar. So Donald Trump stepped forward to negotiate this plan. He had a meeting with Arab and Muslim leaders at the United Nations General Assembly last month, and then the meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. At the White House today, he went into a meeting which was to talk about something else. But before he started that meeting, he said he'd been speaking to his team who were in Sharm el-Sheikh. That is Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, former Middle East envoy, and Steve Witkoff, who has been his envoy to the Middle East since he moved back into the White House in January, and said that there were signs that things were going well, and he himself was putting together a plan to travel to the Middle East, perhaps on Saturday night, perhaps on Sunday. Things were going that well. It appears that things accelerated quite quickly because about 90 minutes later, Marco Rubio, who's the Secretary of State and also the National Security Advisor, appeared with a note at the side of Donald Trump and handed it to him to approve a statement on his own social media platform, Truth Social, that a deal had been reached. He had to approve this message. So that suggested that by that stage, the deal was done. Donald Trump took a couple more questions and then disappeared. Short time later, we got the announcement that there has been a deal for the first phase of the peace deal. Now, there's been a lot of praise for Donald Trump on social media in the last hour or so, many people pointing out how jammed up all the negotiations were. But by putting pressure on Israel and also speaking to the likes of Egypt and Qatar, he managed to put pressure on Hamas as well. And when they gathered in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was clear that Donald Trump wanted a peace deal done. And he's delivered. It's there in the first phase. Now, there's a lot of ground still to cover, a lot of things still to become clear. But for the time being, at least, it appears that Donald Trump has managed to do what Joe Biden failed to do, which was deliver a ceasefire in Gaza. He promised to do it sooner than this, but he's managed to deliver it nonetheless.
Yeah, Alan, let's just, if we can, marry up the domestic and political dynamics that are going on. As we're talking to you, we're seeing those live pictures from Khan Yunis of Gazans celebrating, of course, at news of the deal. I mean, Trump, of course, Alan, has his eyes on the Nobel Peace Prize. How is the Gaza deal playing out for him politically, particularly at a time when he has his own domestic crisis of the US government shutdown?
Well, it would be hard to argue against a peace deal, particularly as many people, including Democrats, have described what is happening in Gaza as a genocide and wanted to see the end of it. So it's hard to argue against that. Will it influence the Nobel Committee this year? Well, unlikely. They're making their announcements this week, so it is unlikely that it's probably too late for Donald Trump to be considered for any prize this year, even though he says he's ended 7 wars, which is a dubious claim at best. But this will be popular. He's delivered what he said he would do. And certainly will be a cause of celebration among Republicans and also among Donald Trump supporters themselves, who believe that only he could have negotiated this deal. And there is perhaps some truth to that, as you've been hearing from Marwan.
Why would you get a peace prize for being a part of a genocide? I mean, you're a part of a genocide, and then you are responsible for seemingly ending it. A lot of these like Western chauvinists are going to look at that and be like, "Well, close enough." I don't know if this will work, but does he actually deserve it? Fuck no, obviously not. I mean, he did the genocide. It's like giving Hitler a Nobel Peace Prize for killing Hitler. It's like giving the Confederates a peace prize for losing. You know what I mean? It's just a ridiculous proposition. Wow, great work, Hitler. Thank you for killing yourself. You are the real savior of the German nation and all the other countries that you fucking invaded. Like, but then again, I have no confidence in the infallibility of the institutions of this prize. So it means nothing. It means very little.
Deal. I remember that Bill Clinton in Northern Ireland flew in to Belfast during the time of the Good Friday Agreement and used pressure
Nobel Peace
on
Prize
both
Committee made their
sides,
decision on Monday from
to get a
nominations
deal
by
done,
January
but that could
31st. Maybe
easily
they
have blown up in his
nominated Trump
face.
then.
But he used his own personal charm and his political contacts to push that through. Donald Trump was always likely to go when a deal had been done by the people that he'd assigned to negotiate the deal. And so there was talk about flying out perhaps on Saturday night, Sunday morning. Some people would suggest he wanted to go on Saturday night after his traditional round of golf. And then we heard from the press office in the last couple of hours that he'll have his annual medical on Friday, and the intention was that he would fly to the Middle East shortly after that. Now, the White House has, in the last half hour, called what we call a lid. That means there'll be nothing more from the president this evening, so he may well go on to Truth Social. We'll keep an eye on that, obviously, but there'll be nothing coming through the press office or from the White House. It may well be that at the moment, behind the doors of the White House,
so they're just going to keep bombing like crazy.
To the Middle East first thing in
I just want to know why the Trump admin presented such a reasonable plan this time. Why the sudden shift compared to previous plans, which were always super pro-Israel and essentially non-starters for Hamas? No, they didn't. They did present the same fucking non-starter for Hamas proposal. The only difference in this instance is that Hamas at least agreed to the conditions. That's it. That's the only difference.
Well, there's always the talk of, well, there's a deal in the offing, it's about to be signed. But as we've learned over the last 2 years, particularly when I've reported from the Middle East and from here on this, there's no deal until there's a deal. Until the names are on the paper, nothing's happened. But of course, it's all about sequencing. It's about you do this, then we do that. If you pull back to there, we'll do that. And there could be concerns that the Israelis have agreed to pull back to a certain distance, and you know that that will be monitored very closely. And the Israelis have previous, when it comes to making an agreement and then breaching it. And we've seen that in Gaza itself, but also in southern Lebanon, just in the last few months. And so there will be a concern. So I'm sure the negotiators who are there, particularly for the Middle East and Muslim countries, will want to make sure that every step of this is marked, monitored, and assessed at each and every single step. Because, as you say, peace deals can fall apart very quickly. It is the old Reagan line of trust but verify, and that is exactly what they'll be hoping that they do. But from Donald Trump's statement when he said both sides will be treated fairly, you can guarantee that those who have talked Hamas into making sure that this was a deal that they could sign will be holding Donald Trump to those exact words.
All right, Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher live for us there in Washington. Alan, no doubt will.
Oh my God. Evan Hill over at Open Source and Visual Forensics Investigations Open at Washington Post reports new. This is from LH Reports and a guy who previously worked at Forensic Architecture. New. Since October 2023, the IDF spokesperson unit has released dozens of 3D animations illustrating alleged Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iranian sites. The style is unmistakable. Satellite zoom-ins, black and white wireframes, and red textured houses. A new visual language of war. Fascinating work here tracing how the IDF recycled 3D assets from a cyberpunk sci-fi art project, the Scottish Maritime Museum, and elsewhere to populate its widely seen models of supposed enemy locations in Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran. One of the most infamous, the alleged underground Hamas command city used to justify an unprecedented assault on the biggest medical center in Gaza, was actually an animation that the IDF had used the previous year, saying at the time it was a tunnel beneath a UN school. What? You mean to tell me that these guys were fucking doing such a piss poor job that they were reusing assets? That it wasn't actually a real schematic? It wasn't actually real schematics of the undisputable Hamas tunnels under the fucking under the Al Shifa hospital? I thought there was a command center. Wow. How did they not realize they would be caught for this? Oh, right. They know and they don't care. Exactly. Exactly. They do not give a shit. You're telling me Israel lied? Okay, dude. Yeah. Remember the gold vault under the vault full of gold under a Lebanese hospital? And they forgot that Lebanon isn't Gaza, and you have Western reporters who can just like knock on the door of the hospital. Which, by the way, if there was a gold vault under the under any hospital, that still doesn't give Israel the right to blow up the hospital, mind you. But they wanted to do that, and then Western media just knocked on the door and was like, "Can we see your vaults?" There, Israel says there's gold, Hezbollah gold, and they were like, "Okay, sure, take a look." It is alarming once again that not a single fucking person held Israel to account after this. They didn't turn around and go, hey, by the way, what's up with this shit? You guys claimed that there were like, you know, miles and miles of tunnels under all of these like key infrastructure that you blew up, and you never showed miles and miles of tunnels that were in operation. With Al Shifa, they showed the tunnels that they had built under the Al Shifa hospital when Israel was in control over the strip. Okay. They also showed personally that those fucking tunnels were actually, the remaining tunnels were blocked. There was no direct entry point. Unless they poured concrete while there was a fucking genocide going on, it would make no goddamn sense, would it? But remember how many people fucking yelled at me when the Al Ahli hospital was bombed, and I said, this is 100% Israel. Very unlikely that it's anybody else, especially considering that Israel had bombed that hospital 2 days prior. Little known fact, the Al Ahli hospital was hit with an artillery shell 2 days prior to the courtyard explosion. 2 days prior. And all of the major media, just like myself, said, BBC, everybody else said, yeah, this is most likely Israel. Of course, Israel blows up hospitals all the time. They have done so in the past. And what's really interesting is that they all turned around and apologized when Israel did this like bullshit ass, like, no, it was actually a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. I promise. Tariq Abash, before I resigned, John Feiner was the guy who said to me and others that we had credible intelligence there was a Hamas military base in Al Shifa hospital days before Israel's incursion that led to the deaths of premature babies in incubators. Even if that intelligence was right, it absolutely wasn't. Remember the ridiculous Israeli walkthrough video as evidence. You still don't have a right to kill babies. But it was so evident that this purported intelligence was bullshit that Jeff Bezos' Washington Post published a takedown investigation of the claims. The damage was done, and it was too late. Not just for those babies, but for the dozens of future military actions on hospitals and schools that Israel would commit, taking countless more lives. I am all for people recognizing that we need to shift our policy on Israel-Palestine, but if you spent nearly a year and a half with the power to do so and instead made excuses for allowing a genocide, especially when you can't even take the time in your word salad to admit your role and responsibility in getting the U.S., getting us to where we are today. Anyway, feel free to read for yourself and decide if John cares about Palestinian lives or about how the policies he supported have undermined American interests, our national security, and our global credibility. Maybe someday when Democrats have influence to stop war crimes, they'll use it. Yeah, this is after John Feiner wrote that article on Politico, the op-ed piece, where he said, "We serve the Biden admin. It's time to impose conditions It's time to impose conditional aid to Israel. Impose conditions on the aid to Israel." Remember when they first blew up the Al Ahly courtyard and the international media initially suspected that it was obviously Israel because they'd blown up the hospital 2 days prior to the courtyard explosion? And then they fucking turned around and said it was an Islamic Jihad rocket. It was a Hamas rocket, or it was actually an intercepted rocket that fell in the courtyard and had this like massive explosion. Ridiculous things, ridiculous claims. And that was enough for all of the international media organizations to turn around and apologize to Israel. And then Israel took that and literally took that confidence and basically blew up every other hospital. Every single fucking hospital in the Strip has been attacked by Israel directly. Every single one. At the time, motherfuckers were saying, "Hasan, how dare you say Israel would strike a hospital? Israel would never strike a hospital." This is part of the reason why it's very difficult to trust what Israel says. You must wait to see what Israel does. Speaking of mistrust in our mainstream media institutions, breaking news: CNN's Van Jones is among 16 mainstream journalists, including 2 New York Times reporters, serving as mentors in a new journalism fellowship explicitly created to help Israel win its information war. Drop site Sharif Abdul Quddus reports that Jackie Karch, who launched the fellowship after October 7, said it was her way to shift the narrative in Israel's favor, citing a call to fight on the battlegrounds of academia, law, business, media as inspiration. Karsh has praised the IDF as the most moral army in the world and dismissed Gaza's casualty figures. New York Times mentors include former Jerusalem bureau chief Judy Radorin and Sharon Otterman, who covers campus protests. The fellowship claims to be resolutely nonpartisan, though its founder has never expressed sympathy for the tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, including 20,000 children in what UN officials and a vast majority of genocide scholars characterize as genocide. Incredible stuff. I mean, it's true that Zionism is nonpartisan in the U.S. Yes, unfortunately it is. There is a bipartisan consensus on Zionism in the United States. Okay? There's a clarification to that post from Dropsite. Hold on, let me fix the gray bars again, and then I'll read that. The clarification reads as follows. Not all 16 mentors are journalists. Kudos writes in his story for Dropsite that the fellowship has attracted 16 scholars and journalists from several mainstream publications to serve as mentors, including The Atlantic, Spectrum News, The Spectator, Ynet, Times of Israel, and 2 journalists at the New York Times. Yeah. There is no other country on the planet that gets to do this kind of shit. Like openly, at the behest of a foreign nation, openly dominate American discourse like this. They don't hide it. They don't shelter you from the truth, or they just straight up say it as it is. They say, "We're doing this." Anyway, on that note, I am once again tired, and therefore this will be the end of my broadcast for today. I will, of course, be live tomorrow talking to David Adler, who actually was recently released after being kidnapped by the Israeli government. David Adler is one of the members of Progressive International. I will be talking to him specifically about his experiences tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific time, about being apprehended, about going on the Gaza Sumud flotilla. He's the co-general coordinator of Progressive International, someone I've spoken to quite a bit. He is actually originally a Los Angelino,